today we're going to tie a pattern that we've tied before. The difference here that I'm going to try to show a little bit is just tying in a smaller size. One of the very first things out of the gate, I'm sure you can't see these overly well because I'm so macroed in, but I have this pair of glasses that just a headband with magnifying glasses on it. And I know I look like an idiot, but I can at least see what I'm working on. Quite often the flies that I use are going to be smaller. You want to make sure you have them in your box, especially if the hatch that's coming off is small, because you do want to match the hatch. And if the hatch is coming off and they're just itsy bitsy little things and you're throwing out there a big old clump, you're probably not going to do quite as well. So most of the flies that I tie for video, I'll be on like a size 14. I don't fish with a 14 a lot, but the 14 is a decent size to be able to show by camera how to tie. So just as an example, here in my vise today that we're going to be using, it's going to be it's a size 20 dry fly hook. And just for reference sake, this is a size 14. So keep that in mind when you're tying flies. Your hook sizes, the higher the hook number, the smaller the hook size. So here's a 14, here's a 20. The 20 is much smaller, obviously, but if you have small little bugs coming off of the water, then you'll want to make sure you have something this small in your box. Where I'm limited more than anything else is my ability to get things on the tippet. So if I get, well, these magnifying goggles work great, but I don't take them out on the river with me usually. So here we're going to tie in some wire, and I got carried away talking and not even telling you what the hell we're doing. We're going to be doing a Caddis, elk hair Caddis deer hair is what I'll use. When you're tying a tiny little fly like this, I do tend to be a lot more judicious with my thread wraps. I just don't go crazy like I can with other flies. I don't go that crazy with other ones, but here every single wrap I'm trying to pay attention to. So the first material we're going to tie in is this silver or this gold wire. And this is one of those places where you do need to downsize, or you can. This is an extra small gold copper wire here. And even though it's wire and I can pull it fairly tight, I can't pull really tight on it. I can't just jerk it around because it's getting light enough at this point that it's very easy to break, or much easier to break anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that back so I don't have to cut that far end off. Again, trying to be a little bit careful with my thread wraps. So I'm not going to go up and down and up and down. I'm just going to come right back down the shank here and get this wire secured to where I want the body of my caddis fly. We'll call it a deer hair because that's what I usually use. That's it. Again, I'm not taking too many wraps. I'm going to turn to superfine for my dubbing, which works well if you're going to be using a dubbing kind of a pattern on a small size, because superfine just blends in really well. And I'll usually grab a little bit of tan and a little bit of like cinnamon, one of each color here like this, and then I'm going to kind of blend them together by kind of pulling them apart and putting them back together, pulling them apart and putting them back together. And then I'm going to go ahead and kind of quickly just prepare this in my fingers and my hand. And the way I like to do it is to have it pretty thin up there at the top here, a little bit thicker as we move down. That allows me to get the taper that I'm looking for on the fly. I'll wet my fingers just a little bit, and we will get that on our thread there, and then I can kind of just go ahead and, again, trying to keep my fingers wet, but kind of slide that that fella down, and we're going to take our first couple of wraps here around the very back, and we're just barely starting to get into the dubbing that's on that thread right about there. So from there we're just going to start working our way up the body, and then we will want a tiny little taper. So you'll see I'll take a couple of wraps forward, and then I may take a wrap or two back, just to add some additional thickness to it for that taper. And hopefully you can see we've got a little bit of a kind of a variegated pattern going on now here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in a hackle, and the hackle that I'm going to use is this is just going to be a ginger grizzly barred, and you're going to want to focus on these feathers that are clear down here at the very bottom of that hackle. Those are the smallest ones. So once you get your hackle out, you can gauge it just by wrapping it around your hook like this and say, yep, that's about what I want. You can also use one of these, which is a hackle gauge. And with a hackle gauge, all you do is we're going to take our hackle, and I'm going to just kind of bend it right around that post that's on the gauge there, kind of like this. You can see I've kind of just curled it around, and then I'll just look at where those fibers are sticking out, and those fibers are going to be sticking out pretty dang close to the 18 to 20 area, which is about where I want this one. I want the silver or the shiny side facing me, and if you can see, as I've trimmed that, I've actually trimmed that a little bit differently I pull those hackle fibers out straight and then just kind of cut them straight to give myself a few little barbs there. And the reason for that is it just helps your thread grab and stay in place a little bit better, especially when you're working on these small flies. I'm going to come on in here now and go ahead and trim the balance of that piece off there. And then at this point I'm going to go ahead and just throw in like a 1 or 2 turn whip finish, because I am going to use my bobbin cradle. So I've got my whip finisher, and I'm not building a head or anything here. I'm just trying to get my thread secure, just so as I'm spinning my rotating vise, I'm not unwinding my thread, and it won't unwind if you throw yourself just a quick half hitch in there, which is basically what that hackle plier will do for you. So now we're completely hands-free. Got my thread hanging out there. I've got my hackle pliers. Being that this is a much lighter hackle for a size 20, I do want to be a little bit more careful with it because its stem is going to be a little bit more delicate. I'm going to take 1 full turn to make sure I have 1 full wrap right around the front of it, and then I'm going to take kind of open wraps, avoiding that hook point, especially now. I know I always say that, but especially here, where you're working with such a delicate and small stem. So I will make sure I get myself completely around that, and then I'll just go ahead and let it go back towards the back. And then again, this stuff will break off really easily, so you'll want to be careful with it. Once I get it to about there, I'm going to keep the tension on my hackle here, and kind of in the same fashion that I've tied this before, we're actually going to use this gold extra small, and we're going to work its way up the hook, and we're going to just go ahead and counter wrap that a little bit so it's going up the opposite direction. Surprisingly, this doesn't trap much hackle. It ends up kind of cutting right through it all. The other nice thing about it is I've just tied off my hackle. So I've released my hackle pliers. So that's kind of what we're left with here, and that's going to be the abdomen of our caddis fly. I'm going to give this one a haircut, so because we're going to the classic, you know, deer hair wing on this, or elk hair. It's going to be deer. And when I start getting down about this, you know, this small in terms of the hook size, I don't mind giving it a little bit of a haircut. It'll just help that wing on the top lay down a little tiny bit more. So once again, we're gonna, for our hair wing, I'm gonna turn to this bleached deer hair. You probably see me use that a lot. I like it because I can see it on the water. You can see all that under hair, so we do need to come in here with our comb and comb out some of that under hair before we stack this and straighten it all up. So I got one side, now we're going to do the other side where the tips of the fur are. Make sure we get any under hair out, or as much out as we can. And you can see, again, this will be an example of how cool hair stacking is for some of us. How kind of jagged the ends are because they're all of different lengths. So I'm going to grab my hair stacker. I'm going to put this in tips first, so it just gravity pulls those tips down to the bottom of my stacker. And then I'm just going to tap this stacker on my table a few times. And what that's going to do is make those tips so that they're much better aligned. So that's what you end up with after stacking it. So I'm going to go ahead and pinch the ends here. So we're going to get our measurement on this wing, and we don't want this wing to go much over the back end of this fly. And that's where this can be a little bit tricky, because we really are going to have to, you're going to feel like, hey, I don't even know how I'm keeping these in my fingers. You're going to be pinching those so close to the tips. So I go ahead and make that pinch, and then I'm going to go ahead and clip that off with my scissors so that I'm left with a nice straight edge of fiber here for my deer hair. And I will be wrapping my thread right now counterclockwise, and by doing that you can see it jumps back towards the back of the hook, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to let these ends dangle a little bit over the eye. I'm going to take that first wrap down, I'm going to pull it sort of tight. I'm going to go ahead and take the next wrap and pull that one even a little bit tighter. And keeping in mind it's a small fly, so we don't want a lot of wraps. So, you know, I pretty much have this secured with just 3 solid wraps, knowing that I've also got to come in with a whip finish. So we'll do that right now. We'll just come right on in with our whip finisher. We'll stick 3 or 4 wraps right down through that nice little head there, and pull that off and pull that tight. But I'm going to look at the bottom of this as well. Primarily, I don't want any of these deer hair to go beyond that 180 degrees over the top of the hook. So if anything is starting to wrap its way around towards the bottom, I'll typically trim that out. I don't have any this time. Usually I do. That one's kind of close, but not quite there. And I'm just doing some trimming because that's just what I do. This is your size 14 again, just for comparison purposes. But when you have a small, you know, a hatch of Caddis or PMDs, those are the ones I'll be tying up in a size 20, 22. You got to have these in your box. Again, if I threw the 14 out there in the water, and this size is coming off or smaller, they probably are not going to touch this one, or not much. So hopefully this is helpful in terms of, you know, just my approach to when I'm tying something a lot smaller.